study of Dr. Anand Prakash to gain insights into the current critical social legal issues. The previous talks have been on issues related to trafficking of women and children, the new labor codes, and the impact of closure on schools on marginalized children. MARG, a non-governmental, non-partisan organization, was set up in 1985 by Dr. Vasudha Dhagambar, a legal scholar, a lawyer, a legal scholar, and a legal activist, to work on social legal issues at the grassroots level. In my mind, there are two very critical contributions of MARG in the field of law and working with marginalized communities. One is the in-depth understanding of displacement of people because of large development projects, in particular dams. And this was done through field-level studies and not through any desk research, but field-level studies talking directly to the affected persons. And this was done in the 1980s and late 1980s and early 1990. And this started the whole issue of what happened to people when they were displaced from dams. From that talking to people, asking them if they knew, they started with the Sardar Sarovar Dam and asking people if they knew what happened, where will they be going, do they know what they're entitled to under the law. And from there came another very big contribution, and what MARG has pioneered in is legal empowerment work, which includes, simplifying law and holding workshops and creating a cadre of paralegals in different parts of the country at the grassroots.
I had never thought that I would get this privilege, because having known him since 1980, because he happened to be the father of my friends Sameer and Saurabh Prakash. And at that time, we knew people's fathers only vaguely. They were just shadowy presence in our lives. And we were the generation that, went all awkward and just would say, "Namaste, uncle," if we were invited over home for lunch. But, that was also the time that we didn't particularly, speak of our fathers, illustrious or otherwise. And but when I entered the profession, I realized that, what a presence Dr. Anand Prakash had in the profession itself. Because it just so happened that, everybody knew him, everyone spoke of him so respectfully. And when I saw him as a junior appearing in court, addressing the court, I realized that, one was in the presence of a great legal luminary. So, that's why I'm greatly privileged to speak about him, and also my association with MARG tells me that, what a wonderful association MARG and the Dr. Anand Prakash lecture series have, because like Seema said, MARG's work has been based mostly due to its founder, Dr. Vasudha Dhagambar, on a lot of meticulous research, nuancing of legal subjects, and the way when we see Dr. Anand Prakash's work, his professional life, and what he brought to the profession and to the world, we realize that there is indeed a close association of Dr. Anand Prakash and Multiple Action Research Group.
I have to speak about somebody whom I know for the last 40 years, and so therefore it's both a pleasant and a difficult task. Nevertheless, I'll do my part of duty. He would be speaking today on the subject Evolving Dimensions of Federalism in India. Justice Bhat, after practicing law in the Supreme Court of India and Delhi High Court since 1982, was elevated as Judge Delhi High Court on 16/7/2004. Thereafter, he became Chief Justice Rajasthan High Court on 5/5/2019 and subsequently joined as Judge Supreme Court of India on 23rd September 2019. He is most eminently suited to speak on the subject because Constitution has been his favorite area. He has been a subject, the Constitution has been a subject of serious study by Justice Bhat, both as a lawyer and a judge. His judgments are reflective of his deep understanding of the constitutional nuances. In his pursuit of social justice, he has fine-tuned the law in consonance with constitutional values.
The Constitution begins with very tersely, and it describes India shall be a union of states. And that's not it, as the next 394 articles go on to explain in great detail. Unlike many other fundamental features of independent India that were considered radical at the time and were first introduced through the text of the Constitution, the history of federalism dates all the way back to ancient India. I will not dilate too much on it, I will briefly touch upon this. The concept is neither recent nor its history linear. The word federalism itself may not have been a part of the contemporary vocabulary of the time, but historians today who have had the benefit of looking backwards and across time are able to discern various templates in which kingdoms, empires and territory, long since gone and many forgotten, were organized in federal units or for administrative convenience. Whether it was the Ganasanghs in the north of the Ganges that later became the empires in their own right, like the Mauryan Empire in Magadh, or many centuries later the Mughal revenue system, or even the Vijayanagar kingdom, or presidency towns of the East India Company, Indian history is replete with rich examples of federalism in action. Now, whether these demarcations were an active effort to accommodate diversity or simply strategic to protect new conquests that retained their identity as units, is that the history is often speculative and inconsistent across such a wide cross-section of time and geography. But edicts, textual records under the patronage of rulers themselves, and the accounts of travelers, we have foreign travelers like Fayan, Hunsang, and so on, which form the sources of such history, confirm undoubtedly that the great thought went into these methods of organization and administration employed by rulers. The standout example from ancient India is the empire famed for its rich art, architecture, inscriptions, and historical sources, the Mauryans. What began as a loose-knit empire in 182 BC was centralized heavily by the conquest of the Indo-Gangetic plains. Across successive rulers of the dynasty, the rapidly increasing vastness of the empire was dependent on the loyalty of the commanders that were delegated the responsibility of controlling and administering the new territories. Eventually, the empire came to be divided into 4 provinces within the empire's capital, that is Pataliputra, present-day Patna, which was ruled by the emperor directly. Each of the 4 provinces, Tosali in the east, Ujjain in the west, Suvarnagari in the south, and Takshila in the north, were governed by a royal prince as the king's representative with the aid of council of ministers each. Chanakya's Arthashastra is believed to have shaped the extensive bureaucracy of the empire, with a civil service that covered just about every aspect of governance across each province. The Mahamatta system established in this era is often credited for the inspiration in bureaucratic organization which evolved down the time into the Jagirdari system, the Mansabdari system during the Mughal era, the British Indian Civil Service, and finally the All India services consisting of IAS, IPS and IFS. Jump to the 1500s, where the Mughal Emperor Akbar improved upon Sher Shah's land revenue system and divided his empire into 12 provinces or subas, which were designated to be efficient tax revenue collection units. The provinces were governed by subedars who received instructions from their emperor as one link of the complex chain of command that held this empire together, despite its sheer breadth of territory. The subedar was responsible to protect the province both internally and against external aggression and maintain discipline among the armed forces. Akbar's 4 central departments is departments, finance, war, judiciary, and supply, were replicated at the provincial level as well. By the time Aurangzeb took over, who had himself started as a Subedar of a province, there were 21 provinces consolidated under Mughal rule. These were gained either by military conquest or were allowed to retain autonomy if they promised allegiance to the emperor, a promise reinforced by the ties of royal marriage. In British India, the Charter Act of 1833 elevated the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India to consolidate and centralize the administration and make the East India Company's domain the subject of the Crown's trust. However, within 20 years, the Act was amended, divesting the company's powers, and Queen Victoria's proclamation established direct rule, dramatically changing the landscape of federalism in India after the 1855-57 War of Independence. It was realized that decentralization of power had to be the strategy to administer such a vast territory, and the Indian Council Act of 1861 sought to reverse the trend of the 1833 Act. Bombay and Madras were restored their legislative powers, and sharing of federal powers became more fluid. Then we had the Government of India Act 1935 and the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. These introduced limited self-governance at the provincial levels in an attempt to accommodate rival nationalism of the Muslim League and the Indian National Congress. The Objectives Resolution proposed a highly decentralized federation before independence, wherein the residuary powers were placed with the provinces and the center was to have limited jurisdiction. The question is, how then did we inherit the federal India in its present form? This complete 100-degree volte-face has to be understood in the context of the partition and its aftermath. The division of the Indian subcontinent, both in terms of land and its people, which brought untold trauma resulting in the creation of Pakistan. Haunted by this, the Indian national movement faced further challenges of integrating 560 princely states with the provinces of British India. So we had two Indias. One was a more or less integrated India, which was the British territory, to which the Indians became the sovereign heirs. And then we had the other 560 territories, which was almost 48% of the country's land, which was split into several sovereignties. And we saw the genius of a leader like Sardar Patel, assisted very ably by VP Menon, who brought about this miraculous integration within 2 years. This moment in history is where it was witnessed firsthand the need for a strong central government that could lead development and influence reform while maintaining stability among the federal units. The new federal system had to be protected from threats to its integrity, keeping in mind that each of the hundreds of princely states could not possibly have an equal say in the governance of the country as a whole. Dr. Ambedkar, during the Constituent Assembly debates, said that the draft constitution can be both unitary as well as federal, according to the requirements of time and circumstances. In normal times, it is framed to work as a federal system. But in times of war, it is so designed as to make it work as though it was a unitary system. Such a power of converting itself into a unitary state no federation possesses, which remains true even today. Therefore, though it follows a uniquely centralized model, India's federal structure retains a high level of flexibility, which enables its responsiveness in the face of adverse circumstances. The federal units are interdependent rather than independent. The center is often the source of policy but is highly dependent on the states for the actual implementation of the initiatives and programs. This is why the phrase cooperative federalism has been such a catchy characterization. It recognizes that governance in our country relies heavily on intergovernmental collaboration, where the union can overstep in areas of national interest and unity.